Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sapadi, evābhitaḥ, paśyan, diśo, apaśyat, puraḥ-sthitam, Vṛndāvanam, janājīvya, drumākīrṇaṁ, samā-priyam, sapady evābhitaḥ paśyan, diśo paśyat puraḥ-sthitam, Vṛndāvanam janājīvya, drumākīrṇaṁ samā-priyam, sapady evābhitaḥ paśyan, diśo paśyat puraḥ-sthitam, Vṛndāvanam janājīvya, drumākīrṇaṁ samā-priyam, sapady evābhitaḥ paśyan, diśo paśyat puraḥ-sthitam, Vṛndāvanam janājīvya, drumākīrṇaṁ samā-priyam, sapadi, immediately, eva, indeed, abhitaḥ, on all sides, paśyan, looking, diśaḥ, in the directions, apaśyat, Lord Brahmā saw, puraḥ-sthitam, situated in front of him, Vṛndāvanam, Vrindavan, jana-ājīvya-druma-ākīrṇam, dense with trees, which were the means of living for the inhabitants. Samā-priyam, which were equally pleasing in all the seasons. Translation. This is we're on the last few verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, translated by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. So this is one of the last verses, up to 64 we have. Then looking in all directions, Lord Brahma immediately saw Vrindavan before him, filled with trees which were the means of livelihood for the inhabitants, and which were equally pleasing in all seasons. Translation, please repeat. Then looking in all directions, Lord Brahma immediately saw Vrindavan before him, filled with trees, which were the means of livelihood for the inhabitants, and which were equally pleasing in all seasons. So purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Janājīvya-druma-ākīrṇam. Trees and vegetables are essential, and they give happiness all year round, in all seasons. That is the arrangement in Vrindavan. It is not that in one season the trees are pleasing and another season not pleasing. Rather, they were equally pleasing throughout the seasonal changes. Trees and vegetables provide the real means of livelihood recommended for everyone. Sarva-kama dudamahi. Trees and vegetables are not industry, provide the real means of life. Sapady evābhitaḥ paśyan, diśo paśyat puraḥ-sthitam, Vṛndāvanam janājīvya, drumākīrṇaṁ samā-priyam. Then looking in all directions, Lord Brahma immediately saw Vrindavan before him, filled with trees, which were the means of livelihood for the inhabitants, and which were equally pleasing in all seasons. Om ajnana-timirandasya gyananjana-shalakaya chakshurunmilitam jena tasmai Sri Gurave Namah. Sri Chaitanya-manubhistam sthapitam jena bhutale swayam rupa-kadamaya dadati svapadantikam ardhanastrinandantai yache puna puna Srimad Rupa Padambujo Dulishyam Janma Janmani. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta-vṛnda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhuvaiva cha patitanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So in this pastime, Lord Brahmā, he saw the most amazing display of Krishna's opulence. And this is just a spark of Krishna's splendor. First, he saw all the cowherd boys and calves, just like exactly before. And he was totally bewildered. Then suddenly all those cowherd boys and calves turned into Vishnu forms, with beautiful forearms and beautiful golden helmets and necklaces, and necklaces of gold, and their beautiful lotus feet, and dressed in bright yellow garments. He was totally astonished. And not only that, not only did he see unlimited Vishnu forms, he has four heads, he could see in all directions. All those Vishnu forms were surrounded by sages and rishis all chanting the Vedas. And suddenly he saw all living entities, according to their capacity, were glorifying the Lord. Then so many things, the false ego, space, time, everything was there glorifying the different lords in every direction which he saw. So immediately became totally stunned. This was the most amazing display of opulence. He realized that his mystic power is like we've described, just like a glowworm in front of the sun. Absolutely nothing. So he was totally astonished seeing this enormous display. This was an incredible display of opulence. We've never, throughout Krishna book, we don't see anything nearly as incredible as this pastime. Totally amazing scene. We can't even begin to imagine what the seekers conceive. Nobody can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Only by devotional service we get a glimpse. By mental speculation, we'll try to climb the peaks of the truth and fall into the pits of Mayavad philosophy. I think it's Biswanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says, the black hole of Mayavad philosophy. Vivarta kartenesha loop dididiti. You fall into that black hole of Mayavad philosophy. So Brahma has four heads in all directions. He saw this. He immediately was totally stunned. Now all of a sudden he closed his eyes. He was just so amazed. He closed his eyes. And suddenly he has 8 eyes. He opened his 8 eyes in all directions. What did he see before him? Vṛndāvanam. He saw the beautiful forest of Vrindavan. And how is it described? Druma. Druma means tree. Just like we know in Bhakti-Vinod's house was saying, go druma-dweep. Druma means trees. Janājīvya. They were equally pleasing. They were the means of our livelihood. Actually, the vegetation is a real opulence of the earth. We're thinking having big, big buildings, skyscraper buildings, and everybody's in competition how to build the tallest building in the world. But these tall buildings, they don't give us anything. What? Prabhupada says here, what is that? Trees and vegetables provide the real means of livelihood recommended for everyone. So Vrindavan meant trees. In fact, to make this road, they tried to cut down all the trees on the side. They did cut down quite a few, but somehow somebody had enough brains to make a court case and stopped it. So they had to build the road around these trees. Because trees are very important. We always thought that there's no trees in the desert because there's no rain. But Prabhupada taught us because there's no trees in the desert, therefore there's no rain. We thought there was no trees because there was no rain, but there's no rain because there's no trees. The trees are very important for our livelihood, for living. Especially this people in banyan tree. We read in our botany class, how the trees give off oxygen in the daytime and carbon dioxide in the nighttime. But people trees and banyan trees, they give off oxygen 24 hours by 7. Actually, they're cutting down the forests in, where is it? Brazil at an alarming rate. But those trees, those are the lungs of this world. So many benefits come from these trees. They're the janājīvya, they're the livelihood. We should be very careful, unnecessarily. Just to build big, big buildings, we chop down all the trees. And what does that building give us? The trees are giving us oxygen, they're giving us fruits, they're giving us flowers. Samā-priyam. And those trees are pleasing in all seasons. We see that all the trees, all the bushes and plants, they have their different, they're pleasing in all seasons, but each one has got its own time for blooming. Just like we see the little jasmine, mogra flowers, just at the end of the hot season, beginning of rainy season, they began to give their beautiful flowers. And then after the hot season is over, the cold season comes in, what happens? What is that tree? My mind just went blank. Kunda. Little white kunda flowers with little pinkish highlights. They start appearing. And other types of trees. We see some trees are giving flowers in summertime, some trees are giving in the winter time when it's cold, still some trees are giving nice yellow flowers. All different things like this. And some trees give, just like we see our tamal tree is so gloriously growing here in the courtyard, this very dense foliage. So they're always pleasing. Although each one has its season, they're always pleasing. And Vrindavan, ban means forest, it means trees. Of course, we see the most common of the trees, we see everywhere, not just Braj, but in Braj also, is this neem tree. Just like our wonderful Nimai, he was born under a neem tree and got that name, Nimai. Very, very healthy tree. So where a neem tree lives, nobody should suffer from any disease whatsoever. So the most common tree we see is this neem tree. Then there's one that's not so common like that and not so known like that, but we've described before, the karil. This tree with absolutely no leaves. You see it just grows, little green twigs and very, very sharp thorns. And then just before Kartik, it opens up in a beautiful spray of orangish, pinkish flowers. Reddish flowers, actually. Just like a fountain of flowers, it looks like. And then little beads, little fruits come on the tree. Those are very good for achar. Those fruit is called tenti achar. And one of Krishna's favorite trees is the pilu. Especially if you go to Man Sarovar, you'll see lots of pilu trees. They have little leaves shaped like this. They're sort of fattish. They're very twisted. They're completely absorbed in Krishna Leela, so they're completely bending over like anything. They make beautiful kunjas there in Man Sarovar. And then in the springtime, little flowers come, and after flowers, this little burgundy-colored, tiny fruits come. Tiny fruits, and those are favorite of Krishna Balaram and the cowherd boys. There's another famous tree of Braj, that is called dungar. The dungar tree, instead of fat leaf like this, it's got very narrow leaf, quite long and narrow leaves. And they really bend over. When we go on the Prikrama path to Barsana, we first start that Prikrama path, many dungar trees are just hanging over the path, decorating the path. It's so charming. And then we see there's a special tree that only grows on top of the hills, on top of Govardhan, on top of Barsana. It's a very famous tree. It's called Dho. And this is one of those trees that's pleasing in all seasons. It reminds us of Krishna somehow or other. First, in a rainy season, or just as a hot season begins to end, little tiny emerald leaves come. It's also bending over the parikrama path a little bit. And then rainy season come and they come into full, not bloom, but all the leaves sprout like anything. And Barsana is just a wonderland. You go in the forest called Geberban, and this tree only grows up there on the hills. In fact, they have a reforestation project for Govardhan, and they realize that the only tree they can grow there is this dough. So they're planting dough trees all over Govardhan to make it nice and green like it was before. They're realizing this. Janājīvya. This is the real life of human society. Then little yellowish topaz flowers come in the middle of the rainy season. And finally those flowers fall and little tiny ruby fruits come. And if you come in springtime, in Gaur Purnima time, suddenly you see there's no leaves. But this tree is very light colored bark. And we know after Gaur Purnima, this sun is very, very sharp. Like now, we pray for the sun. If we get the sun, we want to run and sit in the sunshine. But that season, as soon as the springtime comes, we want to hide from the sun. So the summer comes, oh my goodness, we want to hide. Now it's very pleasing. So the sun is very bright, the bark is very light. It looks like, and they're all very intricate trees. It looks like a whole forest of filigree trees. It's called dough. Then, of course, whole last month we were celebrating Damodar knocked over Arjun tree. There's a few here on our Bhaktivedanta Swami Marg, if you know exactly where to look. There's a few Arjun trees there. Here and there you see. They're very tall. They look somewhat like eucalyptus in the beginning. They're sort of whitish bark, and they have long, narrow, sort of, not so narrow leaves like the eucalyptus, but big, long leaves. And in rainy season, they get reddish flowers. And then some sort of fruit comes that I guess the monkeys eat. I've never, just tiny little fruits. So this is and when they become very old, they get very tall. When they get very old and tall, the bark turns a little reddish. Actually, if you scrape off that white surface of the bark, then you find it's reddish underneath. And Srila Prabhupada explained that if you scrape that reddish bark and you soak it in water overnight, then it's very good for the heart. Just like across the street you can find Arjun Arist. Arjun Arist. The special tonic for the heart made from this Arjun tree. Janājīvya, these are the life. What kind of health are these big tall buildings? They're blocking the sun, they're blocking the wind, or channeling the wind in strange ways. But these trees are for giving us life, janājīvya. Like this, we could go on and on and on describing all the trees of Vrindavan. In fact, I believe it's Jagat-tarini from Australia, Burijan's wife. She has done a lot of research, more than me. She's done a lot of research on trees. And she was going to write a whole book. I don't know whatever happened to it. The trees of Braj are very special, not ordinary living beings. Just like our Raghunath Das Goswami was sitting at Radhakund. Or actually, he was on the banks of Shamakund. And he thought that in the future, so many devotees will come from America, from France, from Germany, from Russia, from Ukraine, from funny countries called Croatia and Slovenia and Poland, and from all over the world devotees are going to come here. He could see into the future. And there's no proper ghats, there's no proper facilities. How will they take darshan? How will they take bath in Radhakund? And he thought, well, if I get some money, I'll fix up the kunds. And then he thought, oh no, I'm thinking about money again. Because we've read how Raghunath Das Goswami had opulence greater than Indra, the king of heaven. So he said, oh no, I'm thinking about money again. So he became silent, moaned for some days. Meanwhile, some businessman from Calcutta, he went to Badrinath and wanted to offer Lord Bhadri Vishal nice donation. Somehow the other day we saw a video of what Badrinath is like now. All snowflakes are blowing here, and it's all covered white and everything. Everybody moves out, goes down below. But during the season, people go, and he went to Badrinath. He went to offer this nice donation. But he got dreamed, and Lord Bhadri Vishal came in his dream. He said, you don't give that donation here. You go to Vrindavan. From Vrindavan you find out Radhakund. And in Radhakund you find out Raghunath Das Goswami. And give that money to him. But he will not take it. Then you tell him, Lord knows his desire to fix the kunds. So somehow he got to Vrindavan. We can't imagine. This is a couple of 100 years ago. Only because of Prabhupada, Vrindavan has regained its fame. He made Vrindavan famous all over the world. He took Vrindavan all over the world. So somehow he got to Vrindavan. There was a nice roads those days. What to speak of getting to Radhakund is not that you just went and got a taxi and went from here and there. Somehow he found out Radhakund. And he began asking around for Raghunath Das Goswami. He found him. And he told him, I have a big donation for you. And Raghunath Das said, wherever you came from, you please go back. I don't want to see your money. And that gentleman said, but Lord knows your desire to fix up the kunds. Then immediately he said, all right, give it here. Not like as soon as we hear, oh, big donation, give it. But it should be for the service of Krishna. It should be for the service of Krishna. So then he began contemplating how to fix up the kunds. Somehow Radhakund he was able to make very straight. A little, almost square, a little rectangular actually. But all the sides are very straight. But somehow to make Shamakund, there was some trees in the way of making things straight. You've seen Radhakund is very straight. So our Radharani, she's very straight, simple. Side Gopi Radhe Radhe. But Shamakund is crooked. Because our Krishna, he's a very crooked fellow. So there was some trees in the way. So he marked those trees and he hired some people that tomorrow you cut down these trees. At night, Yudhishthira Maharaj came in his dream and said, myself, Arjun, Bhima, Sahadev, Nakula, we're all here on the banks in the form of trees doing our bhajan. We don't know who's this tamal tree? We have no idea. Who are these trees of Vrindavan? All living entities are not ordinary living entities come to Vrindavan. So we should be very careful about cutting trees, not unnecessarily. So he said, we're all here doing our bhajan, you don't cut any trees. In the morning you'll recognize us. So in the morning he saw all these 5 trees. So he told them, don't cut them, you make everything around them. So specifically that ghat where Raghunath Das's bhajan kutir is, that is called Pancha Pandav Ghat, one of the names. There's many names, but one is Pancha Pandav Ghat. And right on the ghat, before my very eyes, I watched a very old ancient neem tree dry up. Now just the trunk is there. And all the old sadhus, they told me this was beam. All the other trees are no longer visible. That one's practically disappeared. Just an old trunk is there. So all these trees, with his 4 heads, Brahma saw in all directions. He saw beautiful trees. And those trees, janājīvya, they were the means of livelihood. They're bringing rain, they're bringing so many things, the oxygen, we're breathing. The government has to supply oxygen. What will they do? The trees are doing it for free, without taxing us. And we're so ungrateful. We turn around and cut them down, chop them up, make them into pulp, make paper, and then we print pornographic magazines with this paper. Useless use of trees. Never cut trees for this purpose. So Vṛndāvanam, Van, of course we know means forest. Vṛndāvanam, whose forest? Is Vrinda's forest. Vrindavan. But she has voluntarily surrendered it at the lotus feet of Srimati Radharani. So she's Vrindavan Ishwari. But Radharani has appointed her to manage the forest of Vrindavan and manage all the leelas. So she's the Bandevi, goddess of Vrindavan. So we have to be very, very thankful for all these trees. And especially in Vrindavan, we should be very respectful. We don't know who these trees might be. It's like this tamal tree. Many people don't know this isn't the original tamal tree. The original tamal tree, somehow or other, it dried up. So in the Goshala, actually, Prabhupada writes that they were very rare, but since Prabhupada made Vrindavan famous, everywhere I go, I'm beginning to see so many tamal trees. So we have quite a few in our Goshala garden. So we brought one small one over here, on Vijay Dasami day, the same day as we inaugurated the 24-hour kirtan. Well, same titi, but a different day. Vijay Dasami we planted this tree, and now it's growing completely luxuriously. We can't, and nobody knows it's not the original tree. So, it's a very small purport. Prabhupada didn't have much to say about it. This is about, I've run out about trees. Next we'll see Lord Brahmā. He falls down like a golden rod. And next chapter he begins to offer his prayers. Suddenly Krishna wound up completely. The huge scene was there in front of Brahmā. And somehow Krishna just, whoop, from one moment to the next, he wound up the whole show. And just Brahmā was standing there, stunned completely, looking at the beautiful forest of Vrindavan. You see these tamal trees, very luxuriant, sort of very darkish leaves. But the bark, you see, is completely black and always crooked. You see, this is very crooked, not a straight tree like the Arjun tree. In fact, the gopis and Radharani, when they're running with tears in their eyes, mad and ecstatic love for Krishna, where is Krishna, where is Krishna? They see something is blackish and crooked, so they embrace the tamal trees. In fact, Radharani told Lalita Sakhi that when I leave this body, you take my body and wrap it around a tamal tree. This is how special tamal trees are. You wrap it around the tamal tree, so I'll be eternally embracing Krishna. So we have a few minutes left. If anybody has anything more to say or any questions.
Thank you, Deena. So when Srila Prabhupada was translating, the editors were there, they're doing the same process as you would normally do with the dictaphone. And was there any special time of the day that you would do that? Same like before?
I don't know, Devi Shakti knows all these deeds. She was here, I wasn't here. She told the story yesterday. Or last time she gave class, she was giving the story.
Despite so much history in the Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam and so much detail about Krishna, why do philosophers and educational and historians always think that Krishna is just a fictitious person with so much evidence there? What is that?
That's Krishna's Maya. It's Nam Prakasha. I'm not visible to everyone. I'm not visible to everyone. He tells Arjuna, why am I telling you this science of Bhagavad-Gita? Because you're my friend and you're my devotee. Only the devotees can understand. The scholars, Prabhupada describes, are like bees licking on the bottle of the honey. They see the honey there, they want it, but they're just licking on the bottle, speculating and speculating. But the devotees, they take off the cap, put their hand inside, and they taste the honey. They render devotional service to Krishna and feel the ecstasy. They chant his holy name and feel the ecstasy. And Krishna is just like, there's one chapter, most confidential knowledge. Krishna reveals himself very nicely in that chapter. So confidential means, just like if you take some pictures of your family, You don't go running on the street to anyone and everyone, oh, this is our family, we were on vacation at this place, this is us doing that. Not to anyone and everyone. You don't do like that. Who do you show those pictures to? Your friends. Those who are confident. It's confidential, so those who are confident. So Krishna only reveals himself. Others he's covered by this Yogamaya potency, Mahamaya potency. We can't understand how fortunate we are to have the shelter of Prabhupada and get real bona fide knowledge coming through disciplic succession. Just somehow or other, we were like cockroaches. And Prabhupada came and switched on the light. Somehow or other, we ran underneath his lotus feet. We could have run anywhere, but we ran underneath Prabhupada's lotus feet, that's all. We can't imagine our great fortune. Prabhupada said even big scholars are addicted to smoking and drinking and womanizing. A young boy with no education, he can give all these things up and chant the holy name. Maya is so strong. Prabhupada again and again told us, you're not afraid enough of Maya.
Hare Krishna. I just wanted to say, I was hearing a class from Prabhupada, he was saying that generally in the Bhagavad-Gita we have a picture, how the trees are there, the people who expose their bodies and they get the body of a tree. That's outside the dham, as I understand. And then Prabhupada also said in a lecture that you see so many pigs and so many animals in Vrindavan. He was saying that when people live in Vrindavan and commit offenses, then they get a body of a pig or something. So
especially sinful activities.
So, but the trees in Vrindavan are not kind of that kind of thing because they're in the dham and they're special. So as I understand, the trees outside the dham may be suffering because of their sinful activities, but in the dham it's different.
Dham is very special. The Prabhupada said those who are too sinful, those who live in Vrindavan are very sinful, then they take birth as the hogs and the monkeys. It said, what is that? Anya kshetram papam kurutam, tirtha kshetram vinasyati. Tirtha kshetram papam kurutam, bhajralepa vinasyati. The anya kshetra, other places, papa kurutam, if you do sin, by going to the tirtha kshetram vinasyati. We know this word, vinashaya chaduskritam. Tirtha kshetram vinasyati. By going to the holy tirth, those sinful activities are destroyed. But tirtha kshetram papam kurutam, bhajralepa bhavisyati. It becomes like bhajralep. Bhajra means this barley. If you grind barley, it's just like sometimes we're making chapatis and we see how after all this, what do you call it? The atta flour is sticking to our hands, and very hard to wash off. But bhajra is even worse. The lepa means just like we put this sandalwood, but you put bhajra lep, then it's just like that. You can wash and wash it. Very difficult to get off.
Prabhu, just like you said that trees, we shouldn't cut the trees. But
Unnecessarily. We have to sometimes.
Sometimes during the rainy season or the very heavy winds, the trees fall down. So what do you think about that?
That's by Krishna's arrangement. If Krishna knocks down a tree, what can I say? If you unnecessarily cut trees, somehow we need fuel and we need some to build our house, so we need some trees. But we're just printing useless literature. So many acres and acres of trees are made into pulp just to made paper and make useless, totally useless literature. It's like now we're in marathon, we're spreading the literature. Srimad Bhagavad-Gita. This is the literature to print, if you're going to print books.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
We heard this Prabhuji give this comment about trees. That trees are not like people who are sinful, but the hogs and others like monkeys. But they are also very special. They're like not like ordinary monkey or ordinary dog. Even if they were sinful in the last life.
Yeah, there's no ordinary living entity in Braj.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for the most beautiful class on the trees of Vṛndāvanam. I just wanted to add, I mean, significant, but Madhavendra Puri is a very special devotee, and he is in the form of a tree, and he is one of, I think there were 3 people who see the very excellent pastimes of Radha Shyam Sundar, so he is one of them, and he's also situated on the banks of
Yeah. Oh, we've got about the Gunjamala, because every time I walk around MBT, there's so many Gunja creepers are coming up. If you know where to look, they have a little stem, so many little stems like this. It's a creeper, it's not a tree. And little tiny leaves along those stems. And those leaves are very, very tasty. They're very tasty. If you go to Vrindavan, you'll see them all growing in the kareel tree, where there's lots of thorns. They grow there because the animals, everyone likes to eat them. And just before Kartik, little flowers come, almost like tiny, if you've seen the flower that a peep creeper gives, like that. And then little pea pods come up, little tiny ones, thin ones. And there's a whole bunch of them. They form a little ball. And then at the end of Kartik, they break open. And you see all these reddish black seeds. If you know where to look in MBT, you can see there's just a few that have come this year. Our Gulmalata, our Gunjalata. Anyway, so many trees there in Vrindavan. We can all fall down at the soft and wonderful lotus feet of that person who's brought us to Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada ki, Granthara Srimad Bhagavatam ki.